So, after completing the antibiotics modules, now we'll get into the antifungals. In this module 1, we'll discuss about the fundamental problem and the biological logic of why fungus do not respond to antibiotics and why fungus need specific group of drugs to target them and kill them. So, go through an overview of types of fungi also in this video and the group of drugs and how it targets and why it targets in that specific way. So, we'll get started. This is Medicine Beyond Harrison. If you are new to this channel, do like and subscribe. So fundamental problem, fungi versus bacteria. So fungi are eukaryotes, like it's like humans. It has a ribosome, it has mitochondria, it has nucleus, and it has metabolic pathways, very similar to eukaryotes and like humans. So the therapeutic window is very narrow. So when you give a drug, you cannot, it can't hit everything without harming the host also. So you need to give specific group of drugs that target only the fungus and not the host. So whenever you give an antifungal drug, it has more side effects than an antibiotic drug because when you target a fungi, the human host also gets to be targeted. So, clinical consequences because of the shared biology between eukaryotes, that is humans, fungi, there are very few safe drug targets, very fewer antifungal classes, and organism specific gaps are still there, and the toxicity matters much more. So, in antifungals, the spectrum is not equal to the potency. So, we'll discuss more about this. Yeah. So these are the common overview of the antifungal fungus infections. So we usually classify into superficial, that is the dermatophytosis, where we target the pityriasis, tinea nigra, dermatophytosis, and the white petra. The causative organisms are Melissecia, Trichosporon, Microsporum, and Candida. So subcutaneous, Candida of the skins can lead to Candida albicans and other species of Candida, sporotrichosis, chromoblastomycosis, and mycetoma also. So, systemic infections can be caused again by histoplasmosis, coccidiomycosis, blastomycosis, paracoccidiosis brasiliensis. So, in systemic organism, opportunistic infections can be again caused by Candida, Aspergillus, Cryptococcus, Mucormycosis, and Filamentous. So, this is the way how it infects that type of classification of the fungi. So where it infects that. So now what is the ultimate classification of fungi? So it can be yeast, it can be yeast-like fungi, it can be mold, or it can be a dimorphic fungi. Yeast, these are round or oval organisms. These are the yeast forms where Cryptococcus neoformans are completely yeast. So yeast-like, these are partly as round as oval, around oval like yeast, as well as some are in chains also. So Candida albicans is the classic example of yeast-like form. Dimorphic fungi, it can exist either as a yeast form or like a filamentous fungi, mold form. So these are dimorphic fungi. Yes, the main example is Histoplasma capsulatum. So molds are actually filamentous fungi. This is the true mycelia with aerial and vegetative mycelia are present. Examples are Penicillium, Aspergillus, Mucor, and Rhizopus. These are molds. These are actually more resistant than the yeast-like organisms. Molds multiply more faster than the yeast-like organisms. So we have discussed about dimorphic. These are histoplasma and blastomycosis. It can either exist as a yeast or like a filamental form. So basic two classifications are one yeast and the other is mold. In yeast, we mainly target about the Candida, Trichosporon, Cryptococcus, and Rhodotorula. So in case of molds, it can be further divided into aseptate hyphae with and or with septate hyphae. Aseptate hyphae, these are very important group of organisms which are resistant to most group of antifungal agents. So these are zygomycetes, rhizophus, and mucor. That is, in septate hyphae, we have dimorphic fungi, opportunistic Arpacillus, and dermatophytes like Trigophyton and Microsporum. The core concept of antifungal drug. How does it act? Where does it act? So antifungal activity depends entirely on the target site. All systemic antifungal target only the four survival pillars of a fungus. So understand the pillars of how the fungi survives, and now you can predict the antifungal or the table that the group of drug that can be targeted for a specific fungal infection. The main four pillars of survival of fungus is the cell membrane. Over that cell membrane is the cell wall, the nuclear function like DNA and RNA, and finally the mitotic machinery. So no other major system target exist against fungus. So cell membrane is made up of ergosterol. Cell wall is made up of beta glucan or chitin. This is very important to understand that cell wall is made up of two different group of structure. It can be either beta glucan ring or made up of thick chitin cell wall. The nuclear function with DNA and RNA and mitotic machinery. So some group of fungi have more dependence and reliance on the cell membrane with large quantity of ergosterol content. Where if you give an ergosterol inhibitor like azoles, fungi can be destroyed. Whereas some fungi depend entirely on the cell wall and the beta glucan content present in it. So when you give a beta glucan inhibitor like echinocandins, you can break this. Some organisms depend on the nuclear function and mitotic machinery. We will discuss about in the upcoming slides. So this is the image you need to understand. Every fungus, this is suppose this is a fungus. This has a cell wall. It is made up of beta glucan or chitin, and it is made up of cell membranes such as ergosterol, and the nucleus made up of DNA and RNA. So this is the host bed where the fungus lies. So we are going to target each one, and for specific anti fungus, we are targeting specific group of drugs based on the type of filler that it exhibits. So mapping the drugs. So cell membrane is made up of mainly ergosterol content. You can go for azoles. Amphotericin B will discuss much in detail. It almost creates pores in the cell membrane, which slices the fungus completely. It's also a very toxic drug that we'll discuss about in the upcoming slides. So cell membrane, mainly remember about azoles. And cell wall, mainly dependent on beta glucan. Echinocandins are a better group of drugs that target the cell wall. DNA and RNA, we have true cytosine, and for mitosis inhibition, we have glycophyllin. Everything else other than this logic is secondary. Only this logic you must need to understand in order to understand the antifungal and what antifungus agent that you need to give. So mainly the white tables. Table means the group of an antifungal agent that can be given for a fungi. It actually very differs because the different fungi depends on different pillars. Some fungi can modify a pillar and some fungi can bypass a pillar. So these are the very important things that you need to understand. So antifungal reflect biology and it doesn't need a memorization protocol. So at the end of this module, like 5 6 videos, we will discuss create a table such that you don't need to even memorize a single fact about the antifungal therapy. So you need to know only the concept. Azoles. So azoles mainly inhibit the ergosterol synthesis. So it blocks the butene alpha demethylase enzyme. This is cytochrome 51. It creates a defective cell membrane and it also inhibits the growth. So it is an enzyme inhibitor. It's not a structural destroyer. So it takes time for its activity. Hence given for longer duration. So it mainly blocks the demethylase enzyme. When azoles work, basically these organisms such as Candida albicans, Cryptococcus, and dimorphic fungi like Histoplasma, Coccidiomycosis, and all these organisms are mainly targeted by the azoles. So it is ergosterol dependent. When the fungus is ergosterol dependent, that is cell membrane dependent for its survival, and also it is a very slow growing fungi. Also, it is a yeast or yeast-like organisms. When these criteria are met, then azoles work wonderful. So when azoles fail, when there is a low ergosterol dependence, alternative sterol group, such as other than ergosterol, there is some other sterol group in the membrane. When there is efflux pumps and then there are thick cell walls. In all these cases, azoles can fail. So you must need to understand that only Candida albicans responds to azoles, whereas Candida glabrata and Candida krusei has resistance against azoles, where Candida glabrata is resistance prone, but Candida krusei is even intrinsically resistant for azoles. So mucorales are azoles largely fail for mucorales like rhizopus and mucormycosis. Don't go for azoles in these when you suspect these agents. So these are selective disruptors and not broad spectrum. So we give azoles only for specific group of organisms such as Candida albicans, Cryptococcus, and dimorphic fungus. Echinocandins target the cell wall. So it inhibits the beta 1,3-D glucan synthesis in the cell wall. It targets the fungal cell wall. So humans have no fungal cell wall. So it has an excellent safety profile. So it has a low toxicity risk also. So it can be used. Like examples are Casper fungin, Micafungin, and Adinodula fungin. It has specific use scenarios that we'll discuss in the upcoming modules. So echinocandins work best when the cell has fungus has high beta glucan content. When the fungus cell wall is thin and fragile, and it is also of yeast morphology. So basically, yeasts are easily treatable forms, whereas molds like fungi are good treatment. So Candida species Even for glabrata and cruzi, you can go for echinocandins. So when you suspect a candida, if it is albicans, usually the azoles work wonderful. When you have Candida glabrata or cruzi, it is the echinocandins that you treat it with. So echinocandins can also fail. These are fungus such as Cryptococcus, which has thick capsule, Eukaryotes, which is chitin heavy. Other than beta glucan, we have already seen that chitin can also make up the cell wall. When Eukaryotes have chitin heavy cell wall, dimorphic fungus, echinocandins will fail. For Aspergillus, it is only fungistatic and not fungicidal. So biological reasons of why echinocandins fail can be due to low beta glucan content in the cell wall because of capsule marking and the chitin dominant structure of the cell wall. So amphotericin B. So this is the brute force that we like hitting a fungus organism with an hammer. So it is a physical membrane destruction. So it binds to ergosterol directly, creates pores in the cell wall, causes cell membrane and causes leakage and cell death. So it does not inhibit enzyme. It is just like a brute force hitting and puncturing the cell membrane, causing lysis of the fungus. So because of this thing, amphotericin is very broad spectrum. It does not depend upon the growth rate, does not depend upon enzyme expression, does not depend upon the cell wall composition. It direct structural damage works against almost any fungus organisms. That is the same reason it is also very toxic drug because of partial binding to cholesterol. It's similar structure to ergosterol. It damages the renal tubules. It can damage the potassium. It can cause potassium and magnesium wasting. So broad activity of amphotericin B comes at a cost of host toxicity that you need to understand. So amphotericin is still chosen even though there is toxicity in very few scenarios, such as when the patient is critically ill, when the patient is neutropenic, and then the fungus infection is disseminated. The fungus is rapidly invasive, azole resistance, or cell wall protected like Cryptococcus and mucormycosis. It is only the amphotericin B that can be given. So amphotericin clinical examples of when you use an amphotericin is severe histoplasmosis, CNS cryptococcosis, mucorales, and refractory Candida infections. This is where we mostly go in for amphotericin. So first logic, there are four logics behind antifungal therapy. The first logic is the morphology of the fungus, whether it is a yeast, whether it is a hyphated organism, or it is a broad aseptate hyphae. If it is an yeast, usually it responds to azoles or echinocandins. Yeasts are generally slow-growing organisms, slow-growing fungus, and have it is reliable mostly upon the cell membrane. So you can go for an azole. In case of Candida, other species, you can echinocandins can also be used. So in case of hyphated organisms, it is mainly the azoles or the amphotericin. For broad aseptate organisms, it is always the amphotericin B. Cell wall, if the cell wall is main pillar of the fungus is the cell wall, then you can go for echinocandins. If it is chitin rich, echinocandins comes as usually resistant. So only for beta glucan rich cell wall, you can go for echinocandins. Case of ergosterol dependent pillar mainly, that you can go for azole sensitive. And in case of altered sterols, such as other sterols other than ergosterol, it is usually azole resistant. For type of growth, if it is a slow growing organisms, azoles are okay. You can start with azoles itself. In case of rapidly angio-invasive organisms, always go for amphotericin. So bedside thinking, when you see a fungal infection, ask whether it is an yeast or a mold. So whether it is a bloodstream or a tissue invasive organism or just a urinary commensal, whether it is patient is immunocompetent or neutropenic, or when the patient is stable or he is crashing. All these things you must need to answer before starting on an antifungal agent. So now the logic narrows therapy instantly before species identification. So stable yeast, go for echinocandins. And after treating with echinocandins, if you want a maintenance therapy, you can go for an azole. In some cases, you can directly start on azole therapy. And in case of invasive mold or cryptococcus, when the patient is crashing, always go for amphotericin. So species confirmation refines, not defines the therapy. So you must need to understand that. So whether it is a yeast, mold, or whether the patient is crashing, you must need to answer all questions before choosing an antifungal agent. So antifungal choice is biology driven. It's not about memorizing tables of which is responding to which antifungal agent. It's about understanding the cell structure, the growth, and the host context of the fungus. So now, if you ask me, tell me how the fungus survives based on what pillar it uses to survive, and I'll tell you which drug will kill it. Similarly, you must also need to understand that in upcoming modules, we'll go into examples, clinical case scenarios on various fungus infections, and we'll target each and every antifungal agent also in detail in this series of antifungals. If you're new to this channel, do like and subscribe. We will discuss more in the upcoming modules. Thank you for watching.